Good morning or good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in. Welcome to episode 2 of the ItSynergy Hacking the Human Security series. Thanks very much for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about passwords, so hopefully when we're done here, which will be in about 15 minutes, you will walk away with one or two key takeaways regarding how to better deal with all of the passwords related to technology in your life. I think as I talk with users, one of the most common complaints that I hear is related to passwords and how difficult it is to follow best practices, have different passwords, have complex passwords, remember them, all those types of things. So we'll be talking about all of that today and hopefully leave you with one or two things that you can go change to increase the security of your world. So let's start out talking just a little bit about ItSynergy. And let's talk about why we're here today and why we're giving this webinar. So why would we put on free security webinars? Well, our why, the reason that we exist and what brings us to work every day and makes us excited to get out of bed is what we call creating positive experiences with technology. And so if you think about maybe when you got that new smartphone for the first time, or saw a new gadget for the first time, or maybe you were able to get more accomplished more quickly at work because of technology. That's why we do what we do. It's in order to create that feeling. So that moment where you have that feeling where you say, wow, this is really cool, that's what gets us out of bed. If we can create that feeling for people, that's really what drives us. And so hopefully with some of the content that we're giving you today, we'll create a positive experience for technology for you. So why are we here? Why are we on this webinar? Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the statistics related to security and why we've launched this webinar series called Hacking the Human. IBM did a study back in 2014 that said that 95% of all security incidents involve human error. CompTIA, which is a technology industry association, in 2015 did a study and concluded that human error accounts for 52% of the root cause of security breaches. And Experian, the big credit reporting agency, back in 2015 did a study that said employees in negligence are the leading cause of security incidents but remain the least reported issue. And so our goal in the next 14 minutes is to give you some quick action items to help you be security smart. As you can see from these studies, regardless of which one you choose to believe, the overwhelming evidence is that greater than 50% of all security incidents are human caused. And so you can have all of the fancy software and antivirus and firewalls and all that other equipment, and at the end of the day, you're going to be addressing less than 50% of the security threats to you and your technology and your organization. And the only way that you're going to be able to address that majority of threats is by addressing the human element. And so that's what we hope to do in the next few minutes. So you can join us on the second Thursday of every month at 11:30 a.m. Arizona time for a new 15-minute topic, and we'll be talking a little bit more about next month's topic later in the webinar. So on today's topic, we're talking about passwords. So ready, set, let's get going. So first of all, as we talk about passwords, let's talk a little bit and quantify exactly what the problem is. Why do we need to talk about passwords? Well, the reason is that more and more attackers are finding success via, and when I say success, I mean getting in, getting money, achieving their goals, installing their malware, their tools, whatever it is they're doing. The way that they're gaining success is through a couple of key things related to passwords. Number one is guessing a poorly constructed password. And number two is using credentials from hacked sites to get into other sites using the same credentials. So let's talk about both of those things. First of all, let's talk a little bit about poorly constructed passwords. So I have here a graphic from an organization called splashdot.org. They do a survey every year and publish this data about they actually do the top 100 most frequently used passwords. And so I've got here the top 10 most frequently used passwords. And there are a couple of interesting things from here. First of all, it's very interesting to me that 50% of the most used passwords involve a sequence of digits. The shortest one being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the longest one being all the way up to 9. But you can see that that sequence of digits occupies 5 of the top 10 spots. The other thing that's interesting to me about this graphic as well is the number that are unchanged from the previous year. And so you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 has remained the #1 worst password for 2 years in a row. So I want to first apologize to anyone who's on the webinar today whose secret I have just revealed, but if this is one of your passwords that we've got pictured here on the graphic, then I'd suggest you might want to consider a change. And then in terms of using the credentials from hack sites to get into other sites, we saw this recently with LinkedIn, where LinkedIn was hacked. A large number of their passwords were released. LinkedIn responded by asking the users to change their passwords on LinkedIn sites, which was great and protected future breaches of the LinkedIn accounts. But what also happened is that a huge number of users were using the same password on LinkedIn that they use on a lot of other sites. And so what a lot of the bad guys are doing now is trying that LinkedIn password on a variety of other sites, from the most severe like a banking site to maybe other social media sites, and getting into accounts that way. And so either way, there's no good that's coming from that. So what's the problem? And I'm sorry, excuse me, what are the best practices? Well, best practices when it related to password, I think at the end of the day, we all have some sense of what best practices are. We know that we should have a different password for every site. We know that we should change those passwords on a regular basis, and we know that the complex passwords are the best ones, the ones that include uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols, all that type of thing. But those things to accomplish are technically difficult. I don't think it's uncommon for anyone on this webinar or anyone out there today who's a regular user of technology to have passwords across greater than 100 different sites when you start adding up, you know, not only the big ones, your Facebook, your bank, your Gmail, that kind of thing, but what about all the little things? What about, you know, some site that you bought something from 6 months ago and you had to register on that site in order to be able to purchase something? What about all those little things that are out there? And so maintaining different passwords for all those sites and maintaining them that they're long and complex and good passwords can be very, very difficult to do. And so that creates a real challenge for users. Okay, so you say, I'm in. I get it. I understand the problem. I feel that pain of having all those different passwords. What can I do about it? Well, let's do a little bit of Passwords 101. Let's do a little bit of password education here. So the first thing we need to know when it comes to passwords is that longer is better. I generally suggest that you use a minimum of 12 to 16 characters in a password. And I would suggest that you think of it as a passphrase rather than a password, because that can help you to kind of lengthen your passwords by using a phrase rather than a word. I've got a link here, and by the way, there are going to be several links in today's webinar, and if you don't get the chance to get any of these links down, feel free to send me an email afterwards. My email address will be at the end of the webinar, and I'd be happy to share any of these links. This is a link to a story on CNN that references a study by the Georgia Institute of Technology, and this was back in 2010, so this is using old technology, but at the time, they used this technology to look at the difference between an 8-character password and a 12-character password. And the finding of the study was that it took them about 2 weeks to hack an 8-character password. It took them about 17,000 years, or at least they projected that, to hack a 12-character password. And so just the difference between 8 and 12 characters, that gives you some sense of what a difference it can make to have longer passwords. The other thing that's important is to have complexity. So complexity means there are 4 things that you can use to make up a complex password. You can use uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. You can't just put an exclamation point at the end of a password, so you can't use password exclamation point and think that you've got a complex password, because the bad guys are wise to that. The other thing that the bad guys are wise to is using shortcuts. So they have figured out that you use a 0 instead of an O. So if your password is PASSW0RD and you think you're being tricky because you used a 0 instead of an O, they're onto that, and they've been onto that for a while, and so that's really ineffective. And the same thing is true with using the @ symbol instead of an A. All those little tricks like swapping out digits for letters and those types of things, they're all onto that stuff, and so those are the first things they're going to try, and so those really aren't effective techniques. So before we dive into some of the tips, I want to share a couple of websites, and I'm going to be referring to these throughout. These are 2 of my favorite websites. So first one is howsecureismypassword.net. This is a great site because you can go out to this site and plug in your password. You could plug in a password that you use today or one that you're thinking about using, and it will give you an estimate of how long it will take to hack that password. And so it's a great site to play around with. So if you go in and put in like the word password, for example, or one of those top 10 passwords that we had earlier, you'll see that it'll tell you that'll be hacked instantly. That's not even a nanosecond that it'll take to hack that. Versus some of the other passwords that I'm going to show you how to come up with today, it will tell you that it'll take quite a bit longer, and I'll actually cite some of those statistics. The other site that I want to refer you to is strongpasswordgenerator.com. This is a great site and one that I use all the time, and this is a site that literally just has a button on it, and you can tell it how long you want the password to be and what type of characters you want to be in the password, and you can just sit and repeatedly hit that button all day long, and it will just sit and generate long, random, complex passwords for you. So two very useful sites, which we'll talk about more as we go along here. So let's talk a little bit through some secure password tricks. So you get it, you say, I know I need a secure password, I know I need all the uppercase, lowercase, the symbols, the numbers, all that kind of stuff. So how do I make a secure password that I actually have a chance of remembering instead of just a random sequence of characters? So the first tip that I have for you is to pick something that's important to you. I happen to be a big Arizona Cardinals fan. The first preseason game is coming up Friday. I'm very excited for the football season to be back. And of course we have here a picture of one of my favorite players, Larry Fitzgerald, number 11. And so one of the things that you can do when creating secure passwords is to use slang or expressions or abbreviations in constructing the password. So if we use Larry Fitzgerald here, who I'm sure is catching a touchdown pass in that picture, we could come up with this password right here, Fitz number 11. So Fitz is Larry Fitzgerald's nickname, number 11 is his number. TD stands for touchdown dash win with 2 exclamation points. So Fitz number 11 TD dash win exclamation exclamation. Very easy to remember, especially if you're a Cardinals fan like I am. But if we run that through howsecureismypassword.net, it'll tell you that it will take 16 billion years to crack that password. So an excellent password, but one that's easy to remember. Here's another tip, is you can use shortened phrases. So if we take a phrase like, my 5-year-old is such a cutie, we could change that to my 5-YR for year -old is, and I'm using IZ instead of IS, and then such a, which is not a real word, but you kind of get the meaning, SUCHA, and then instead of cutie, CUTIE, I'm using QT, all caps, and an exclamation point at the end. So there again, I've constructed a very long, very secure, very complex password, but easy to remember. My 5-year-old is such a cutie. Now, when I run this one through the howsecureismypassword.net, this is one of my best ones in the examples. This one told me it was going to take 43 quintillion years. I don't even know how many zeros that is to crack. A final tip that you can use for constructing some nice secure passwords is to pick your favorite tune. So I went and looked this morning. The #1 song on Billboard.com is Cheap Thrills by Sia. And the first line in the lyrics of that song are, come on, turn the radio on. So you could change that to #1 for the #1 song, CO for come on, comma, CO for come on, comma, turn, TRN. The RO stands for radio on. So once again, we've created a very secure password, but very easy to remember. The #1 song is come on, turn the radio on. When you run this one through, it tells me it's going to take 41 trillion years to hack that password. So there's 3 examples of ways that you can create very long, very secure, very complex passwords, but you actually have a chance of remembering them because of the way that we've constructed it. So the next thing we need to think about when it comes to passwords is how often should you change your password? One of the things you need to remember about passwords is that the security of any password goes to 0 given enough time. So if you give me enough time, any password can be cracked. So we've got the little picture of the baby there. You wouldn't forget to change the baby. Hopefully you won't forget to change your passwords either. We have a great analogy that we like to use is you need to think of it when you change your oil. So everyone's pretty good about changing the oil in the car. So every time you change your oil in your car, which is going to happen roughly every 3 months, think about changing your password at the same time, roughly every 3 months. So moving on from that, now the next thing we need to figure out is how are we going to keep track of all these passwords. So like I said at the beginning, it's entirely possible you've got passwords across 100 different sites. How are you going to keep track of all those? Well, the first thing you need to do is decide on a strategy. Do you want to use online tools, offline tools, or a combination of the two? So, and then you also need to make sure that you choose a tool that allows unique passwords so that you can have 100 different passwords for those 100 different sites. And then you also want to be able to have it enter it automatically so you don't have to sit there and type it in every time. So if you're going to go the online tools route, if you're going to trust the cloud and put all your stuff in the cloud, there are lots of choices. I've got 3 of them here in order from least expensive to most expensive. These are good tools. There are lots of other good ones out there. So LastPass is free for a single device, or if you want to synchronize your passwords across multiple devices, that's only $1 a month or $12 a year with LastPass. There is TrueKey, which is $19.99 a year for the version that synchronizes across all devices, and then Dashlane, which is $39 or $40 a year to synchronize across all devices. These are all cloud-based devices. They'll give you access to your passwords from any device, and you can store them securely. So these are all great choices. And again, there are others out there for cloud-based tools as well. Now, if you're like me and you wear tinfoil on your head and you're paranoid about the cloud and don't trust the cloud and don't want to store your passwords in the cloud, you may want to consider some offline tools. The one that I use is called IronKey. You can find it at ironkey.com. There's a picture of it. It's a secured USB drive that also includes Password Manager. It is, I got lots of fancy language here. It is FIPS 140-2 certified. That is the certification from the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, or the United States government, that is required for storage of sensitive information. It is also has a military certification, MIL standard 810F or 810G. Those are both environmental standards related to the fact that it is dustproof and waterproof. So very, very secure device. It has a self-destruct feature, so if you attempt to guess the password more than 10 times incorrectly, it will actually destroy itself and all of the data on it to prevent hacking. It is tamper-proof, meaning that the entire inside of it is filled with epoxy, which prevents you from actually removing chips. And it stores both encrypted data, so you can put some files on there, and it also has a built-in password manager as well. The other thing that's nice about it, because it includes the automatic entry like I talked about before, what you can do is store the passwords temporarily on your clipboard and just paste them in. And what's great about that is it helps you to defeat a keylogger. So if somebody has installed a keylogger on your system that's recording all the keystrokes, because I'm pasting a password rather than typing it in, the keylogger won't actually capture that data. Now, the downsides to this, because it's an offline method, is it requires a USB. So that means if you need access to your passwords from, say, an iPad or some other device that doesn't have a USB, then you're in trouble. These also don't come cheap. So it's $109 for the 2 gigabyte model. It goes up to a 32 gigabyte model for $600, so it's not inexpensive, but it is extremely secure and a very good way to store passwords if you don't want to go with the online version. And then finally, the last thing I have related to tips is to make your passwords stronger. And the one thing that you can do, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication is something you know and something you have. So greatest example of that is when you take money out of an ATM, you need to have your ATM card and you need to know your PIN number. So you need to have both of those factors. So if you use your newly created super strong password plus a one-time code that can come via text message or phone app, then that drastically increases the level of security even beyond creating great passwords. And two-factor authentication is widely available on almost every large consumer site that you use today. Gmail, PayPal, Amazon, GoDaddy, I could go on and on and on, and it's just a matter of turning it on. So thank you very much. I'm going to conclude. We ran a little bit over. I apologize. Our next webinar is scheduled for September 8 at 11:30 a.m. Arizona time. The registration is live right now, so you can go out to itsynergy.com/webinar and register for our September webinar. The topic is going to be recognizing and avoiding email scams. And just a reminder that our webinars are the second Thursday of every month at 11:30 a.m. Arizona time. There I am. There is my contact information. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks very much and have a great day.